In this video, we continue with the reading of the book titled Secrets of Self-Mastery, an Inspirational Guide to the Mastery of Life by Lowell Russell Ditzen. Welcome, I am Daisy, your hostess. If you found me at this video, make sure to visit my book playlist to grab the previous chapters. Even though I must say, you can start anywhere in this book, and each chapter stands alone offering pearls of ageless wisdom that transcend time. I'm glad you found me. For example, in the chapter titled Handling the Disease of Tension, the author states that 76% of illness are emotionally induced due to some form of strain or continuous tension, which depletes energy, hampers clarity, and undermines self-mastery. Some people say that emotions get trapped in the body. I read in an article from the medical news today, which I left the link in this video in the description, it says that emotions can cause physical symptoms such as muscle tension or pain, and that when these symptoms are persistent, it may feel as though emotions are trapped in the body. Well, they also say that while emotions are not literally stored as physical matter in tissues, unprocessed emotional energy cause chronic physiological tension. Some of you might agree with me that perhaps, and it isn't odd, that on some occasion one may feel overwhelmed as if you're carrying the world on your shoulders and literally feel back and shoulder pain. Or perhaps dealing with certain people can give you pause to conclude that a certain person is a pain in the neck or a pain in the head or a pain in your stomach, and consequently, guess what? You end up with a pain in those areas. Some scientific findings claim that when stress or trauma is not fully expressed, the nervous system gets stuck in a prolonged fight, flight, or freeze loop, locking this energy in the body as physical aches, tight muscles, or restricted breathing. And if that is left unchecked, it can lead to emotional fatigue or even physical illness. The author goes on to also offer practical techniques for handling tension. Well, I will say that there are many golden nuggets in the next few chapters. If you are looking for tools to master this thing called life, I hope that within these pages you find exactly what you need. And before I turn the page, please do let me know you are here. Hit the like button. I thank you in advance. And now, let's head on to the next chapter. Chapter 4, Handling the Disease of Tension. A quote from the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, verse 1. For everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. Quote from Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, verse 10. I have seen the travail which God hath given to the sons of men to be exercised therewith. Quote from the book of Matthew, chapter 6, verse 34. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. A quote from Confucius. The superior man is always candid and at ease with himself or others. The inferior man is always worried about something. A quote by Harry Emerson Fosdick. O God, in restless living we lose our spirit's peace, calm our unwise confusion. But though our clamor cease, let anxious hearts grow quiet, like pools at evening still, till thy reflected heavens all our spirits fill. A quote by Robinson Jeffers. After all we endured, who has grown wise? We take our mortal momentary hour with too much gesture. The derisive skies twinkle against our wrongs, our rights, our power. Look up the night, starlight's a steadying drought for nerves at angry tension. A quote by Montaigne. The truly wise man must be as intelligent and expert in the use of natural pleasures as in all the other functions of life. Relaxation and versatility, it seems to me, go best with a strong and noble mind, and do it singular honor. There is nothing more notable in Socrates than that he found time, when he was an old man, to learn music and dancing and thought it time well spent. Every adult who reads these lines knows that one of the portentous problems for modern man in the Western world is to master the tensions that destroy efficiency, that cause disease and death. Says John A. Schindler, doctor, a big textbook of medicine such as medical students use contains account of roughly 1,000 different diseases. Emotionally induced illness is as common as all the other 999 put together. In 1951, a paper from the Yale University Outpatient Medical Department indicated that 76% of patients coming to that clinic were suffering from what the medical profession calls emotionally induced illness. And in the southern part of our country, New Orleans Ochsner Clinic reported that of 500 consecutive patients who were admitted to the department that handles gastrointestinal disease, 74% were suffering from emotionally induced illness. And the cause? The medical profession, using layman's language, says that it results with scattered exceptions from some form of needless tension. It is not the natural tautness of the animal alert and a quiver in the presence of danger. Neither is it the concentration of the animal as it stalks its prey until the need of hunger is filled. Rather, it's a destructive tension that is continuous, that pounds the victim after the factory whistle blows, after the appointed hours for work are ended. A friend who has been helpful in the ever so slight steps I have made in the art of living calls this spinning the wheels. It is like the automobile on an incline. When the street is hard packed with wet snow, the motor races and roars. The rear wheels spin, but all that comes from it is a terrific strain on the engine and burning of the tires. The vehicle doesn't get anywhere. I have seen, says the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes, the travail which God hath given the sons of men to be exercised therewith. In our generation, it is tension that puts the travail upon us. Many of us are too often like the fighter who is punch drunk. An injury has deadened his sense of when to stop. The bell rings to end the round, but he still goes on flailing the air, pouring out his energy, swinging and punching, all to no avail. Of course, there's another side to this matter of tension. Ask yourself if you ever saw a tense turnip. To my knowledge, a dandelion never had a nervous breakdown or the equivalent in the vegetable kingdom of that all too familiar ailment of genus Homo sapiens, stomach ulcers. Jesus gave us a lovely illustration. The lilies of the field which sow not, neither do they spin. Yet Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. That picture is good for us to keep in mind. Perhaps there are times when it could help us ease unnecessary strains we put on ourselves. But those gracious lilies do not have to face what man does. A world where there are choices and decisions, where there are responsibilities and moral consequences, where there is opportunity as well as the need for spiritual questing and intellectual growth. God created the lilies of the field. But the Bible also tells us that when man was made, God breathed into him his own breath, his own spirit. So a consciousness different from a possible consciousness of the lily was instilled in him. It was an awareness of a world in which there is value, one in which some things are more significant or important than others. A world in which man could drift aimlessly, but where also he could gird himself to struggle against the tide. God gave his crowning creation an awareness of the heights of good, but also the depths of evil. As that spirit was breathed into man, there was created too a capacity to respond or not to respond. Then, as surely as night follows day, tension was bound to exist too. It became necessary at times to be taught, to stand tense and inflexible. In the southern part of France, where the Protestant Huguenots were imprisoned during the long black night of religious persecutions, there is, I'm told, a single word scratched in the stone floor of a prison cell. It was the work of many years, done with the fingernails of a prisoner. Through long months, the soft nail scratched at the unyielding stone this one terrible, inspiring, awesome word for all to see: resist. There is great loss if man neglects his powerful capacity to resist injustice or mediocrity. He loses, and so does the world, if he cannot marshal his inner resources and become tense in a struggle for something better. And how important it is to use this power well, to keep it in its place. The market is glutted with all kinds of advice telling us how to achieve this worthy end. Bookstores and newsstands, with their many books, papers, and periodicals devoted to the problem, give proof of a real need. Much of the advice I've read is good, but some of it seems pathetically shallow. Many times we're told that if we can just keep a pleasant frame of mind, make a game of living, turn our work into play, be at ease, take things a little more in stride, stop striving too hard, get away from the sharp competitive struggle that tears us apart, all will be well. God knows we could apply much of this with profit. In the 15th century, Erasmus was giving to the people of his time a similar kind of advice as he wrote, "After you have dined, either divert yourself at some exercise, or take a walk, and discourse merrily, and study between whiles. A little before you go to sleep, read something that is exquisite and worth remembering, and contemplate upon it till you fall asleep." But such advice wears pretty thin after trying it out for a while. Certainly, Erasmus' counsel will seem archaic for many, as its modern form will seem watered down. It's all right to say, I'm going to whistle a tune and take my job with a song and dance. But there are times when whistling and dancing are out of place and inadequate to the situation that has to be met. It's all well and good to preach to ourselves about keeping the light touch. Smile to yourself as you say, I may end up in the poorhouse, but I'm going to have a good time getting there, and I'll live to sing at the funerals of the poor devils who beat me up the ladder. But when the going gets really tough and the demands heavy, this turns out to be an inadequate solution. The hunter in tiger country should have more than a pea shooter. One needs a heavy weapon to bring down big game. The complexities and pressures of modern life make formidable beasts. The counsel that says, keep the light touch, is firing with that pea shooter when a monster is charging. That is why the Bible is more helpful than many of our modern prescriptions and panaceas. It's realistic. It's balanced. Always positive and constructive. It yet knows the negative and the destructive forces man must face. Nowhere does the sacred record tell us we can walk along a perpetual path of sunshine, where inner lightheartedness can complement the perennial flowers along the way. There is a time for every purpose under the sun. There is a time for war. There is a time for tension, for mobilizing our vital energies for the task. But the Bible goes on to affirm that there is another side too. There is a time for peace. There's a time when the conflict is over, when the demands ought to be light, when the call for sacrifice and effort is negligible. There will always be issues that have to be decided, momentous challenges flung at us, wrongs around us that need to be righted. What will we do in the face of them? Will we just view life pleasantly? Will we be passive, neutral? No, there is a time for peace and its pleasantness, and we will rest and gain strength back while God's in heaven, all's right with the world. But when called, we will not fail in our obligation to face issues, accept challenges, right wrongs. Something of that balance is expressed in the amusing anecdote about a man who had a long and rugged period of highly pressured work. Finally, the time came for him to leave for his vacation. "What are you going to do?" an acquaintance asked. "I'm going to find a little cabin on a lake," was the response. I'm going to put a rocking chair on that front porch. Then I'm going to sit and for a week do nothing. That's interesting, was the response. After the week is up, what then? Well, was the reply, I might start, just a little bit, mind you, but I might start rocking. Perhaps you're thinking, this discussion doesn't help me. I have such terrific responsibilities and there's nothing I can do about it. The organization which I am associated is so complex, we're going through continual changes, and I just can't get away from it. I'm an engineer, or I'm a wife and a mother, trying to run the 7-ring circus called the modern home, or I'm in sales and I have to keep the pressure on every minute. The tensions borne by women are as acute as those of men. Managing a household, being cook and chauffeur and dishwasher and glamour girl, participating in the church fair, the PTA, and collecting for the Red Cross put on pressures that are very real. Such an individual could possibly be saying, I have so much to do. I certainly know about the necessary warring to get accomplished all that needs doing, but I can't, as much as I'd like to, get into my life the other side of the picture, the time for peace. I can't read poetry or raise roses or what have you. If that thought is somewhere in the back of your mind, tell yourself right now that such a thought is a sin against the intelligence God gave you. It's sin against your body that was made to house your mind and spirit. You can make headway, and you must, in balancing the scales. You may get to the top of some mythical ladder or of achievement, but in our deepest selves, we know that the crowning achievement won't be ours. If, somewhere along the way, we haven't first mastered the pounding of the tensions that send us to doctors with all kinds of complaints and ailments. Those men so often understand the real cause of our pain, our ache, or our dragginess. They don't have the time to counsel us to the point where they can lay bare the cause of the disease for us. If they could, we would see tension which we had not mastered. But we ourselves can do something about it. When we start packing the briefcase to take home at night or for the weekend, we can pack it full, put it at the side of the desk, then go to the door, open it, lock it, and walk away empty-handed. Some evening, as you ride home on the train, rather than reading of juvenile delinquency in the late evening edition, just don't buy a paper at all. Don't talk to anyone about the drop in the stock market. Don't permit your spirits to get lower and your blood pressure higher. Begin that book on how to tie flies. Remember, you promised yourself last summer that you would. Check out of the luncheon that is a committee meeting. When you leave the office, avoid the trap of shooting the breeze about what has to be done tomorrow over what a cartoonist called the triple cocktail nirvana. Rather, be a character. That phrase, be a character, is a significant one. Be an individual. Go to a park bench or the library or a museum. Use a little time as you go to work in the morning to think of the many and varied people who make your city. Ask how much you know about your town other than sidewalk you pound from the station to your place of employment. And to get a change of pace, how about finding some answers to the questions that occur to you? It probably will turn out to be fun and full of surprises. If we take on more than we should, we are like the little boy at the picnic who lustily gobbled 6 hot dogs. He may try to forget them as he runs on the beach, but his digestive system working overtime won't let him forget them. 2 hot dogs, eaten slowly, would have been better, Johnny. We in great wisdom informed the boy. We should remember such horse sense counsel at 3 a.m. while we're still churning our yesterday's 2 committee meetings and the special conference with the boss, the dinner date, telephone calls, and dictation that we face tomorrow. We begin to fashion the shaft of balanced self-mastery as we realistically, honestly, and in terms of our own individuality say, with God's help and my own intelligence, there's going to be peace as well as war. There has to be both in my life. I may not be able to escape the former, but I will not let the latter escape me. Then the shaft of realism must be joined to the hub, There's no ultimate conquering of our tension, no balance of abiding peace if we don't maintain contact with God. If there is an infection in our bodies, the forces of healing automatically marshal themselves to combat it. We have also been given a mind and a moral sense to combat the disease of tension, which is just as insidious as any virus that can get into our bodies. We possess resources mentally and spiritually that will control the dangers of tension, just as we have white corpuscles that fight germs. The difference is that the process is not wholly automatic, as it is with our physiological makeup. The mind and the soul need some source of power that will release our resources. The power that does it is the awareness and presence of God within you. This creative and creating power moves through all things and seeks to move through your life to give it order and power and balance and peace. Reinhold Niebuhr, one of the significant theologians of our day, has made the point several times that there is an inevitability of tension. Caught in the web of original sin, we yet long for a better world and better life, which is denied us by the existence of personal and social sin. So we are inevitably strained and pulled by our own imperfect nature, a moral world, and aspirations that cannot be fulfilled. Niebuhr, with the profoundest philosophers and theologians of the ages, affirms that the only answer that can be helpful is the grace of God. God's forgiveness, His love, coming into our souls, will, as nothing else can, break the shackles of tension and bring restorative peace. You may read that statement and say, it's interesting. I've heard it since childhood. It's a difficult concept to grasp. Maybe it's helpful to someone else, but it hasn't done a thing for me. Its meaning will remain obscure if you think and talk that way. But if you consider it carefully, experiment with it often, one day you will come to know its cleansing, redemptive power and its true meaning. There may be someone you don't know who loves, admires, respects you very much, but it will do you little good until you know about it, until you seek it out, until you believe it, until you can reciprocate with affection and regard and respect. So it is here, the healing from the most profound power in all existence, which can bring us into balance, will come only as we seek it, grow in believing it, accept the love and respect, and give our devotion in return. I can almost hear someone saying, this matter of tension has been rehashed so often in so many ways, and I still don't have anything that I can really lay my hands on that will help me. The concept of God is as vague as ever. Can't you be more specific? I think I can. Here's a simple suggestion which has been helpful to me and others have told me has helped them reach a measure of peace when they were all twisted up with tension. One of the best beloved hymns of the church, Dear Lord and Father of Mankind by John Greenleaf Whittier, contains 2 stanzas that I suggest you commit to memory or write out and on a card to carry daily in your wallet or purse. At least once in the day, always try to begin in the morning before the load of work is on your shoulders. Read or repeat the lines. Do it slowly, savoring the thought, the beauty of language. Let the ideas sink deep into your consciousness to help you on the road to self-mastery. Dear Lord and Father of mankind, forgive my foolish ways. Reclothe me in my rightful mind. In purer lives thy service find, in deeper reverence praise. Drop thy still dews of quietness, till all my strivings, all attention cease. Take from my soul the strain and stress, and let my ordered life confess the beauty of thy peace. End of chapter. Chapter 5. Mastery through our ideal self. A quote from the book of Luke, chapter 19, verse 1 through 5. And Jesus entered and passed through Jericho. And behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus, which was the chief among the publicans, and he was rich. And he ran before and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and saw him, and said unto him, Zacchaeus, make haste and come down, for today I must abide at thy house. A quote from A. Bronson Alcott. Our ideals are our better selves. A quote from Carlyle. The situation that has not its duty, its ideal, was never yet occupied by man. Yes, here, in this poor, miserable, hampered, despicable actual, wherein thou even now standest, here or nowhere is thy ideal. Work it out therefrom, and, working, believe, live, be free. Fool, the ideal is in thyself. A quote by Robert Collier. At some time in our life, we feel trembling, fearful, longing to do some good thing. Life finds its noblest spring of excellence in this hidden impulse to do our best. A quote by Martin Luther. Great people and champions are special gifts of God, whom He gives and preserves. They do their work and achieve great actions, not with vain imaginations or cold and sleepy cogitations, but by motion of God. A quote by Macaulay. The difference between one man and another is by no means so great as the superstitious crowd suppose. A quote by Anzia Jezierska. Ah, the thrill of wrestling with dreams forever beyond us. One of the reasons some of us don't become masters of our lives is that we let the best, the ideal self that we were intended to be, become thwarted for any one of 100 and more reasons. It may be held down or held back by circumstances, suffocated by events, put off the track by the expectation of others, but no matter what the cause, we suffer from inner dissatisfaction and frustration. Some light is shed on this situation from an incident described in the book of Luke. The place was Jericho. What does that name mean to you? The geographer and geologist might be interested in the fact that Jericho, near the Dead Sea, is 825 below sea level. It is interesting to the archaeologist as the site of civilizations that go back to 6,000 years before Christ and earlier. To the sociologist, humanitarian and political strategist, its large modern population of displaced Arabs from Israel is a matter of concern. The historian of the Roman Empire cannot avoid the name Jericho because it is associated with the names of Roman conquerors and emperors. Bacchides, Aristobulus, Pompey, Vespasian, among others. Herod the Great built a winter palace at Jericho and seemed to hope it would become a famed winter resort, a fame that has not been realized. And of course, the biblical historian is interested in the place. He will tell you from his knowledge of biblical references that there are associations in Jericho with Joshua, the strong military leader of the wandering Israelites, and also with the prophet Elijah. It was at Jericho that King Zedekiah was defeated by the Babylonian army, at which time the kingdom of Judah came to a bloody and tragic end. I've seen Jericho in recent years. In memory, 3 things stand out. 1, the Arab women with their lovely flowing robes, carrying water pots on their heads with stately grace. 2, the fascinating excavations at Jericho, revealing layer after layer of fragments from civilizations that are no more as the archaeologists dug deeper and deeper. And 3, a sycamore tree, which was pointed out as the one where Zacchaeus climbed to look down on the master when he came to the town. It behooves a modern traveler to examine some of the landmarks. I wondered, as I looked at the tree, if it could have been alive for 2,000 years. Was it truly the tree into which Zacchaeus climbed and whose branches shaded for a moment the most compelling spirit of history as he paused beneath it? I confess to a rather suspicious reaction to specific sites, such as that one, particularly after being told of an incident in Egypt. Travelers near the Pyramid of Giza, seeing the Nile some distance away, asked if Moses was taken out of the bulrushes in that area. Their guide responded, "Well, it used to be farther up the Nile, but we've moved it nearer for the convenience of the tourists." How could one be sure that this was really the tree Zacchaeus climbed? But any doubt on that score could not suppress the thoughts that came to mind just being there. But Jericho's widest fascination is due to the fact that Jesus was there and that he centered his attention on one man, Zacchaeus. The aura of eternity about Jericho comes from the fact that that man, caught by the attention of Jesus, found the sense of his best self, and he began living again by that. Sometimes it surprises me to realize that for 8 years I have been minister to a wonderful congregation in Bronxville, New York. In listening to many a sermon, they have heard me at times repeat myself. It's bound to be that way, because there are certain sources that each of us go back time and time again. When the square pegs won't seem to go in any of the right holes, as someone puts it, when the mind needs refreshment or stimulation, I go first to the Bible and then to one of a group of great spirits, Emerson, Thoreau, Shakespeare, Carlyle, William James. In preaching, as in writing this volume, I rely heavily on them and either consciously cite them or unconsciously express their thoughts. On the basis of what I find meaningful, I'm impelled to share it with others in the hope that it may be helpful in some measure. William James once said that he had many possible selves, many different identities he would like to fulfill. That is probably the case with all of us. He wrote that he'd like to be both handsome and fat and well-dressed and a great athlete and make $1 million a year, be a wit, a bon vivant, a lady killer, as well as a philosopher, a philanthropist, statesman, warrior, an African explorer, as well as a tone poet and saint. But he added, the thing is simply impossible. Then he went on to speak of the fact that every man and woman, among the several selves that he might or she might be, at some point has to decide which self will be the deepest, the truest one. For example, in the minister, there may be still the latent Arctic explorer, in order to keep the one from causing frustration and unhappiness because it cannot be realized, and to keep the primary one faithful to its duty and commitments, there has to be some final decision. We must pick out the one, says James, on which to stake our salvation. When we do that, from that time on, the fortunes of this self, whatever it is, are very real. The defeats will be very real, bringing deep distress or shame, but the victories will bring the richest happiness and fulfillment to offset the defeats. What happens to some of us is that our realest self, potentially, gets lost or is forced into a mold of somebody else's choice. Regardless of the causes or the blame, this self, facing difficulties at every turn, is held back and repressed. I think it was that way with Zacchaeus. He was a businessman, a successful one. He bore the title chief among the publicans, which suggests that he probably had immediate communication with the Bureau of Collections at Rome. Jericho was the center of a profitable balsam trade at this period of history. Quite likely, Zacchaeus was the first tax officer, with a number of collectors under him responsible for paying to Rome the required sum levied on the district of Jericho. Such a job was not one calculated to win friends. The chief collector had to be tough. If he was honorable, as I believe Zacchaeus sincerely intended to be, he had to guard against bribery and overcharging and extortion among his subordinates. On the other hand, he had to be strict in collecting the payments, which many people found difficult to meet. The position was one that made it possible for a man to become wealthy, and Zacchaeus took advantage of the opportunity. But that wasn't the most significant thing about him. Zacchaeus was basically and potentially what everyone wants to be: a sensitive human being, desiring to be helpful, and a man of goodwill toward his fellow men. He wanted both to give and to receive respect and affection. He had within himself an ideal self that he longed to be, outgoing and selfless and generous. But the tax collecting business seemed to force him more and more into another unpleasant kind of himself, where he was forced to be close-mouthed, hard-handed, thinking of himself first and last. It was that man who climbed the sycamore tree to see Jesus. Jesus came. I think the decisive thing that happened to Zacchaeus was that he saw again the image of his best self. When Jesus showed him confidence and love, Zacchaeus suddenly found the fortitude and courage to say, "This is the me that I want to be." And to do something about it, he vowed, "I'm going to give half my goods to the poor, and if I've wronged anyone, I will pay him back fourfold." That ancient but ever-new Bible story emphasizes that there cannot be deep contentment and full mastery until we act in accord with our best selves. In Micah Waltari's book, The Egyptian, the physician Sinu, a follower of the religion of Aten, returned after a long absence to his native soil and sought out an acquaintance by the name of Kapta. This friend, a man who has adjusted completely to the world, said to the physician, "Nothing in the world is perfect. The crust of every loaf is burned, every fruit has its worm. For this reason there is no perfect justice. Even good deeds have evil consequences, and the best motives may lead to death and defeat." Then he added, "Look at me, my Lord Sinu. I am content with my mean lot and grow fat in harmony with gods and men. Take life quietly. It is not your fault that the world is as it is. That has ever been so and ever will." His friend Sinu reluctantly, sadly agreed. "Be it as you say," he replied. "I will ply my trade, and as a recreation I will also start some collection as you have counseled me." The next day he received many lavish gifts from Kapta, but Sinu mused at their reception and at a hunger they did not fill. "He sent me munificent presents, which secured for me such comfort and plenty that nothing would have been wanting to my happiness if I could have been happy." For that man, as for many, there can be no happiness, no inner glow that comes with the sense of knowing what is right, what is best for him, when he was overwhelmed by an alien society. To take Kapta's advice was to compromise, to adjust and forget his religion, to take things as they were. This but created shame and hurt. The longer I live, the surer I am that man is inwardly stamped with an image of the ideal of what he ought to be and is capable of becoming. Outward events and appearances and actions do not necessarily destroy that ideal self. To deny it, ignore it, try to forget it, to act in opposition to its claims, is to have no anchor, no roots, no bauble, and be without purpose, losing the chance to master life fully. There is a beautiful conversation from the Dialogues of Mortality, which reads as follows, quote, "The sheening of that strange bright city on the hill, barred by its high gates. Barred from all, Phrastes? From all, Eraton, who do not desire to enter it more strongly than they desire all other cities. Then is it barred indeed, and most men must let it go? And those who have once desired it cannot let it go, for its light flickers always on the roads they tread, to plague them like marsh fires. Even though they flee from it, it may drag them towards it as a magnet drags steel, and though they may never enter its gates, its light will burn them with fire, for that is its nature. Who then were the builders of this dangerous city? Gods and men, Eraton, men seeking after gods, and gods who seek after men. Does it not appear to you that such a fabric, part artifact and part deifict, reared out of divine intimations and demands, and out of the mortal longings and imaginations that climb to meet these, must perpetually haunt the minds of men, wielding over them a strange, wild power, intermittent indeed, but without end? So anyhow, it has always proved. End quote. Yes, there is a strange and perpetual haunting of the person each of us wants to be at our best. And there's no joy or peace until our daily acts are aligned harmoniously with it. To do this, choices must continually be made. David Seabury, in his book The Art of Selfishness, pointed out that there is a good selfishness and there is an evil selfishness. There are compelling forces that can make for evil selfishness and those that can make for good selfishness. It's up to us to evaluate and then decide between them. For instance, there is the compelling force to withdraw. This, Dr. Seabury says, can be an evil side of selfishness, but its opposite is good, outgoingness. Intolerance is evil, tolerance and understanding good. You have the choice to make with every human being, whether it be the milkman or your mate, the janitor or your boss. To achieve mastery in life, we must start hour by hour, day by day, to evaluate on one side of the ledger or the other our actions in life situations. Each time we are able to place our thoughts and behavior on the credit side, we bring more fully into existence the person who is our ideal within. Occasionally, I have time only for a hurried sandwich at a local drugstore. One of the clerks is especially courteous, cheerful, and kind. His warm hello and pleasant chit-chat are as nourishing to the spirit as the food is to the body. When I ask for extra mayonnaise or another glass of water, there's always prompt service, a smile, and "It's a pleasure to serve you." Once I said to him, "I don't come in here often, but whenever I do, I'm always impressed with your pleasant attitude and thoughtful service. I'm grateful for it. I want you to know it's been helpful to me, as I'm sure it is to many others. I'd like to ask, if you wouldn't mind, 2 questions. First, are you this way day in and day out?" He smiled as he kept an eye on possible needs of other lunchers to the right and left. "Not always, but I keep trying. I figure most everybody is nice. The only way to act is so they'll feel you really believe that. Now and again a customer is disappointing, but I say to myself, most aren't like that. And it's true, they aren't." Well, from what I've seen, you have a good batting average. The other question is this: what helps you most to keep up your good spirits? Don't know, other than the thought that life's too short to mess up with meanness and irritation. I try to remember what my dad told me. "Son, you can be a stinker or you can be something better." I guess that's pretty much it. I try to be better. If we give in to the lesser, meaner self, we not only add to the negative side of life for others, we deny ourselves a precious ingredient to good living, a feeling of self-esteem. We may not be able to control the weather or setbacks and troubles that occur in the course of a day, but we can do something about controlling ourselves. If nothing more, we will have at any day's end the second essential ingredient: self-respect. We must admit the fact that our best intentions don't always succeed. You and I can try. We can create the framework and be willing to strive, but still we falter, we fail, we sin. Lewis Mumford defined sin as a defiance of what a man knows to be best. Sin isn't merely breaking rules that are established by the community, nor is it only deviation from the code of mores of a group. It is defying, not living by what we inwardly know to be best. The discouraging but stubborn fact is that, in spite of our highest intentions, we do just that. We all find that in trying to develop our best self, the lesser selves get in the way. I recall the incident told about Toscanini, who was unable to get the proper tone he wanted from one of the men in the orchestra. He raged bitterly at the men until his anger was spent. Later, other musicians told Toscanini that he was unduly severe with the man, who was a good musician and a man of integrity and character. At the next rehearsal, so the story goes, Toscanini apologized, saying he was sorry for losing his temper. But, as he talked, the memory of the incident rose again in his mind, and he grew irritated. Remembering how he had struggled to bring to life that musical ideal, he shouted, "The trouble is, God tells me how, but you get in his way." We often feel the urge to try our wings, but laziness or little setbacks stymie us. We give up, settle down comfortably again. At such times, we know what's right. We know what our best self ought to be and could be. God tells us, but our lesser selves bog us down. I have spoken little about the large goals, which involve the well-being of mankind. But I suggest now that identifying with some greater cause is an effective method to counteract laziness or selfishness or lack of purpose in life. You are in business. Why? For what purpose? You are a homemaker or a grandmother. Again, what is your broader purpose, the goal for which you are working? If your answers are merely to make a living, to achieve success, to run an ordered home, to raise my children, you are missing out on some of the greatest satisfactions and achievements that man can know. There is a defined and ever-present need to be aligned with purposes above and beyond ourselves. Be a businessman to increase the prosperity of mankind, or a mother who through her life and life of her children will make this a more peaceful world tomorrow than it is today, and you will be rising above the everyday humdrum activities that never enrich man's spirit. Awareness of horizons far beyond us, toward which we are moving, will free us of the demons that shrivel our soul: envy, vanity, self-pride, the thirst for recognition and fame. Once rid of their drains and demands, we enter the ranks of those who are one with all mankind. Such a man is a friend of mine. He is married, father of 3 children, an insurance salesman. He and his family live in a modern-sized community typical of 1,000 scattered across the country. His house is modest and no more conspicuous than that of his neighbors. To all outward appearance, it blends, as does his life, into the quiet and restricted environment. Yet you cannot be with him 5 minutes without feeling a sense of expansiveness. There is a breadth to his thinking and living. International law and order have claimed his interest increasingly since college days. He is an alert student of educational trends and participates in wider movements to improve education in America. His work is not just a business or a means of livelihood. It is a channel for offering practical help and genuine service to others. Because of his wider concerns, he has facets of mastery that endow his life and affect all who know him. Jesus offered Zacchaeus forgiveness, love, that day as he passed through Jericho. That isn't an isolated experience that took place 19 centuries ago in some little town near the Dead Sea. It's one that we can have today. Jesus passes through our lives, and his love, his compassion, and his trust reach out to enfold and lift us. Above all else, there is hope and encouragement as we travel the road to self-mastery, because he gives us, or returns to us, the picture of our best selves and the assurance and strength to seek it. End of chapter. Chapter 6. Mastering the Hobgoblin of Fear. A quote from the book of Psalms, chapter 23, verse 4. I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. A quote by Shakespeare. Our fears do make us traitors. A quote by Henry Ward Beecher. Fear is a kind of bell or gong which rings the mind into quick life and avoidance upon the approach of danger. It is the soul's signal for rallying. A quote by William Ellery Channing. I call that mind free which, through confidence in God and in the power of virtue, has cast off all fear but that of wrongdoing, which no menace of peril can enthrall, which is calm in the midst of tumults, and possesses itself, though all else be lost. A quote by Epictetus. We must be afraid of neither poverty nor exile nor imprisonment. Of fear itself only should we be afraid. A quote by Ovid. The dove, O hawk, that has once been wounded by the talons, is frightened by the least movement of a wing. A quote by Plutarch. Unless you put a stop to your insatiate desires and quit yourself of fears and anxieties, you are but decanting wine for a man in a fever. A quote by John Witherspoon. It is only the fear of God that can deliver us from the fear of man. On January 18, 1912, Captain Robert Falcon Scott and 4 companions reached the South Pole, only to learn to their dismay that they had been beaten in that world-shaking discovery by another explorer named Amundsen. Already the 5 had faced devastating hardship. They turned back, but severe weather conditions, sickness, and insufficient food made their travel extremely slow, bringing their bitter journey to a halt. 10 months later, a search party found Scott's little tent, housing his body and those of his companions. In that tiny speck of tent, on that harsh and barren land, the rescuers gathered together notes, letters, diaries that Scott had written. Among the last things Scott recorded, with hands so cold that he could barely hold a writing instrument, were these. I do not regret this journey. We took risks. We knew we took them. Therefore, we have no cause for complaint. Had we lived, I should have had a tale to tell of the hardship, endurance, and courage of my companions, which would have stirred the heart of every Englishman. He left a letter, among others, to an old friend, Sir James M. Barrie, in which were these words: Goodbye. I am not at all afraid of the end. We are in a desperate state, feet frozen, etc. No fuel. But it would do your heart good to be in our tent, to hear our songs and the cheery conversation. Doesn't that dauntless spirit facing some momentous challenge and facing it fearlessly move and stir you? Doesn't every heart and mind know that this is the mark of a real master of life? Few would disagree with Cicero's remark, whoever is brave is a man of great soul. But I find, as I look at my life and the years of counseling with people who come to me to discuss their difficulties and problems, that the fears that really erode us, that keep us on the side down rather than on top of life, are not those that come from such portentous situations. Rather, it is more insidious fears that haunt each hour. We may not know of them, or we may try to hide them, but they are there all the time, lurking in the background every day. Who among us is constantly weakened by the terror of cataclysmic events where life and death are ever in the balance? Few, I think, if any at all. But many of us are slaves to more subtle and debilitating fears, a permeating sense of inadequacy, a nagging fear of failing, of not measuring up to expectations. The disquieting sense of guilt, conscious or unconscious, with its fear of retribution, of being found out. And then there are pride and vanity, which we protect and try to cover up even from ourselves, but which bring ever continuous fears of being rejected, of being unnoticed, of being thought unimportant. For many another, it may be the fear of age, of being alone, or the fear of pain or illness or death. Whatever it may be, in whatever form it comes, it makes us cowards rather than masters. Catherine Mansfield confesses in her letters, I believe the greatest failing of all is to be frightened. When I look back on my life, all my mistakes have been made because I was afraid. That failing, with the errors it prompts us to make, presents each man with some hobgoblin of fear. Before we talk about ways of dealing with this problem, let me point out that there is a positive potential in the capacity to feel fear. The heightening of concern, the alertness, the keying up, and the concentration of energy that are released are to be expected and can be productive. Each Easter, thousands of choirs and congregations in Christendom sing Handel's Alleluia Chorus. That great composition from the Messiah was written in a miraculously short 20-odd days. At that time, one side of Handel's body was paralyzed. His creditors were breathing down his neck. The threat of imprisonment was at his door, and fear hovered over the instrument where he was at work. But they served as spurs, making possible his prodigious and immortal effort. The Messiah might possibly never have been composed without that stimulus of alarm. But whereas fear has its place on such occasions in life, where it may be a healthy prod to help us resist or speed up our reactions without control and direction, it can be a persisting, insidious destroyer. It is interesting to note how fear seems to provide an extraordinary sense of well-being. You and I, at times, may even deliberately seek to expose ourselves to certain fearsome experiences, and we seem to derive physical exhilaration from them. I think this explains, at least in part, why individuals climb mountains or participate in hazardous automobile races or queue up in long lines before the roller coaster at amusement parks. We may not even realize it, but the fact seems to be that such activities stimulate the whole endocrine system in the body and give us a sense of high physical, mental, and spiritual tone. But fear can be perverted. Such an exhilaration can be disastrous if prolonged. Whereas normal fear may lead to efficiency and an extra output of energy, abnormal and persistent fear, buried with the personality, leads to complete inefficiency. Wisely controlled, fear prepares us to meet emergencies, providing an intelligent caution and sensitiveness needed to do any job well. But ungoverned anxieties and phobias, i.e., fears attached to objects that are not in themselves dangerous, are damaging, eating away at the health of body and soul. I believe psychologists, philosophers, and theologians agree that uncontrolled or repressed fear can poison the mind and weaken the whole character, paralyzing the will and shackling a free response to life. Some years ago, James L. McIntyre, lecturer in psychology in the University of Aberdeen, made a study of the history of fear. He considered the predominant fears of pre-civilized man, lightning and thunder and wild animals, with their immediacy and intensity. Turning to contemporary man and his problems, he affirmed that what modern fear has lost in intensity and materiality, it has gained in extensity, in persistence, in refinement of torture. We will not argue with him, living as we do under the awful threat of an international war that could in a few hours destroy the civilization that has taken centuries to build. We breathe the air of fear minute by minute. When we add to our burden, as so many of us do, the fear of being misunderstood, of being disliked, of being found out, of being hurt or rejected or lonely, of making decisions, we break down the protective devices for well-being. How can we rid ourselves of these hobgoblins? Individually, we can do more about it than we may suspect. First, though, it is necessary to get at the roots of our anxieties by careful, honest self-evaluation. In the church where I am minister, each parishioner was sent a memento at a significant time in the history of the congregation. Reminiscent of the communion tokens taken by elders of the Church of Scotland prior to the sacrament of the Holy Communion, the bronze memento sent to our people had on it a phrase from the Bible. In my judgment, it expresses one of the most provocative thoughts in the history of human ideas and spiritual adventure. It has only 5 words. Let a man examine himself. That sentence asks a man to turn inward some of the attention he pours on the outside. Be honest with yourself. It says, examine your motives, your concerns, your fears in your own quietude. You can be completely honest. You have only yourself in this consultation. You don't have to rationalize or try to hide anything. No one is listening but you. You don't have to strain to get someone else to understand. When sincerity and candor are present, such a self-examination can be healthful, curative. I understand that many so-called instinctive reactions of animals can be traced to early experiences. Notice how that old cat jumps whenever a dog barks, even though the cause for fear is some distance away and the cat is completely safe from attack. The reason? As a little kitten, it wasn't afraid of dogs, but once a dog barked and jumped at the kitten, it was a terrifying experience, and now that fear returns whenever a dog barks. Our pussycat is not able to let reason trace back to her early experience. She cannot come to the point where she can say, this is a great folly I'm engaging in, a waste of effort. But man can. I knew a man who was extremely sensitive and felt that he never was adequately appreciated in his work. He flitted from one job to another, always leaving with hurt feelings and bitterness. To others, it appeared that his nose was always out of joint. Finally, he did a bit of constructive self-examination and concluded that the drive to prove himself, the need to be appreciated, the fear of failing, went back to a misunderstanding of what his father had expected of him. A man who had spent his life in supervising the personnel of a large corporation told me of an employee of his company who literally became a new man. He had shown fine potentialities, and his superiors were interested in grooming him for a job with greater responsibility. But he was timid and seemed to constantly be holding back. He gave the impression of inner insecurity, even though his competence could be seen and was acknowledged by all his associates. My friend reported, it took more than 6 months to try to help that man get to the source of his trouble, but he did. It was the result of having an overbearing father. As a lad, he couldn't please his father and had let the frustrations of boyhood cause anxiety and trouble in his manhood. That man, able to see, understand, and then laugh at his fear, gained a confidence and ease commensurate with his potentialities. He achieved high rank in the war and returned to his business to become one of its most able leaders. A woman, outwardly inflexible and stern, but inwardly troubled and tense, was able to trace, by self-examination, the source of her fear. Although she had tried to keep it locked tight inside, the cause of her trouble was guilt. A girlhood indiscretion had sapped away her best self for years, hobbling a happy adjustment to life. Fortunately, the perspective and wider understanding that comes with maturity finally permitted her to cleanse herself of this guilt and to find her way, which in earlier years seemed impossible. We meet people we oppose. Why? What are the reasons that cause us to bristle, to be on edge, to feel anger or resentment? The answer is to be found in, let a man examine himself. Let reason, good judgment, honesty, and forgiveness cleanse our own soul before we judge other people. This is necessary for the conquest of fear and mastery of life. If an individual with complete honesty will examine, for example, his need to dominate, to appear superior, he very likely will uncover a fear of being in a subordinate position. He may see that he is injuring his marriage, hurting the relationships with his children by continually trying to prove himself superior. That discovery of truth about himself will be hard to accept. It will be distressing. But it can never be damaging if it leads him from his little world of illusions to the world as it really is. Indeed, it can open the doors to humility and self-understanding, and so lead to a more organized, masterful personality. As the neurologist Abraham Myerson said of this catharsis, there is mental gain, character growth as a result. We consciously and unconsciously play tricks on ourselves. The fear of being hurt, the sense of envy or jealousy may be a natural part of our being, but an overweening fear of being hurt, of appearing weak or subordinate, can cause us to be completely dishonest with ourselves and with others. Often we will criticize the jealousy or envy or oversensitivity in other people, trying to pretend that we are not at fault ourselves. But as we develop the art of examining ourselves, we will transform the constructive power of fear into useful purpose. Any step we make in this direction, however faltering and small, is progress toward our goal. For as Lao Tse so wisely saw, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. Many of us have our fears abated and courage strengthened by association with people who are less fearful than ourselves. Charles Darwin, in his Naturalist's Voyage, writes of observing sheepdogs in South America. He was intrigued by the fact that these dogs, when separated from the flocks, were extremely timid, but when with the sheep, they were fearless and ferocious. His explanation was that the dogs, from birth, had been brought up with sheep. When they were with their own, they had courage, but when alone, they had none. Man reacts in a similar fashion. The timid individual can be buoyed up in the crowd and can present to the world a courage that is impossible to feel if he is alone. If we keep our fears to ourselves, trying to hide them from others and ourselves, we will never discover that our neighbors are probably facing similar problems and therefore have a sympathy and appreciation for our anxieties. I was told about a woman who years back had let a really wasteful fear debilitate her strength. She had such terror of aging that she literally brought herself to the brink of a breakdown. But a neighbor with whom she shared her worries, together with a thoughtful and sensitive physician, were able to lead her to see, among other things, that she wasn't alone. Her fear, they showed her, was a widespread one. Through their experience and understanding, they let her see, too, that real beauty is more than skin deep. She rediscovered the truth that character, a growing wisdom, a capacity for humor, were more integral to charm and loveliness than cosmetics and facelifting. But the most important thing she learned through and from her friends was that she was not alone. Recently, I read in a college magazine an article dealing with the anxieties of young people at that crucial stage in life. One of the intelligent observations the writer made was this: one thing we must learn early: sharing one's worries and fears with a trusted friend makes them tolerable. Then the counselor went on to say, but pick the person or those persons carefully. Age is not all important. The important question to ask are, can he be counted on to keep your confidence? Can he be sympathetic without himself sharing your fear-ridden perspective? Does he really try to understand what life seems like to you? People of all ages should remember this. Janet Whitney has written of the visit made by Elizabeth Gurney Fry to a gloomy woman's yard at Newhage Prison on a cold January day in 1817. The turnkeys on the outside were desperately afraid to enter the yard. They warned Elizabeth Fry that the woman inside would scratch and claw at her and tear her clothes off. With the quiet authority that comes from fearlessness, she replied, I am going in, and alone. I thank you for your kind intentions, but you're not to come with me. The turnkeys reluctantly opened the door, and Elizabeth Fry passed through and walked among these women, who had been reduced to crime and filth and despair. Embittered and angered against life, they usually fought any and all who entered, but they did not do so now. She talked to the prisoners about motherhood and asked them to tell her of the injustices they suffered. She began to light some lamps of hope as she talked to them of a subject they no longer discussed, the business of making plans for a better future. The writer Janet Whitney, in describing Elizabeth Fry's departure, says, "She left behind her an inhabitant very strange to Newgate, one usually as much abandoned at its doors at the very gate of hell, that revivifying spirit of human vitality called hope." We must try to offer hope to each other through contact and the sharing of human travail. Association with others sometimes reveals that our fears are really puny in comparison to the burdens that others have met and are shouldering. We can see in them the ability to go ahead with a growing courage in spite of anxieties. If others can do it, we can too. It is reported that Edmund Burke once said, "Never despair, but if you do, work on in despair." There are many people who never really rid themselves of their fears or anxiety, but they have, as can we, a persistence that makes them stick to their guns in spite of all odds. Knowing them can help us to master our fate. I shall always remember the influence of a friend who was involved in what might have been a serious highway accident. I drove by just as the accident occurred and pulled up off the road in front of the damaged cars. There was an electrifying fear in the atmosphere. Perhaps people were injured. Passing cars might crash into the damaged ones. Gasoline from the smashed vehicles ran over the traffic lanes. What if a lighted cigarette were thrown onto the road? Among the individuals in the accident were several women and children, and we could see the panic in their eyes and voices and tense bodies. But my friend, who had been driving one of the cars involved, walked slowly, spoke quietly. By no gesture did he add to anyone's anxiety. Rather the contrary. Later I asked him how he had managed to present such quiet and calm front. His response was, "What is, is. I have nurtured in my mind for years the idea of Jesus that we don't grow an inch by anxiety. That thought was with me during the accident. It's with me now." With such courage, peace, resolution, we can handle any situation and teach others to do so. In the dark days of February 1942, Lord Beaverbrook quoted to Mr. Winston Churchill from a speech recorded in the writings of Thucydides, quote, "Open no more negotiations with Sparta. Show them plainly that you are not crushed by your present affliction. They who face calamity without wincing, and who offer the most energetic resistance, these, be they states or individuals, are the truest heroes." End quote. That statement, made centuries before, imparted stanch resolution to Englishmen in the 20th century AD. Wherever there is contact with constructive self-mastery, there always is constructive power. One of the reasons the church persists is that we are strengthened just in our coming together. We come on the Sabbath day, each of us faulty, subject to terror and temptation. None of us is able to stand up and say, "I'm perfect." Quite the opposite. We're there, meeting, seeking some higher level of peace within ourselves, with our fellows, and with eternity. We can't sing together or try to pray together and know each other without a comfort and an assurance and a quieting of our anxieties. The ultimate source of these is in a growing understanding of and faith in God. As Epictetus, the philosopher who was a slave, said, "I am content with that which happens, for I think that what God chooses is better than what I choose." And this philosophy is founded on a conviction that the heart of creation has more knowledge of the ordering of life than any individual can ever have. In my judgment, One of the ways that we, like Epictetus, can achieve this freedom from the bondage of fear is by a deepening understanding of the nature of God, which reveals His compassion, goodwill, love, and inspires us to trust, have courage, be kind. To grow in this faith is to let more and more of love into our thinking, into our being, and free ourselves of the shackles of anxiety. The Bible puts it truly, "There is no fear in love, but perfect love casteth out fear." I think that we can and should do so much more in the way of developing a deep goodwill as we face the conflict in the international scene today. So many of the chasms between the East and the West exist because of fear, which in turn produces faulty actions in relationships and negotiations. One of the most constructive ways we can and must make progress is through a change of attitude, a change of conviction, growing out of the knowledge that we are all a part of one human family. We must all find the faith that the world and all our lives are subject to a providence which will claim all things in eternity. Each of us must say, "I will fear no evil," not because of my little achievement on the road to self-mastery, nor because of the support and insight gained from my fellow men, helpful as they have been. "I will fear no evil," says the exalted 23rd Psalm, "for thou art with me." This faith will sweeten and clear the waters of life. Recently, in restudying the first chapter of Genesis, I was struck anew by the nobility of that epic conception of creation which exultantly proclaims, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth." One idea particularly touched me with its vitality. As the crown of His creative work, God made man in His own image. Man, as the highest and final order of the creative process, was made Lord over all creation, over the creatures that flew in the air, the fish that swam in the sea, the creeping things and animals that inhabited the earth, the trees and the grasses and herbs. He was not created to be a slave. He was to be God's regent here on the earth, to walk with a confident and kingly tread. We should never forget God's intent for us, to let it dwell deep in our consciousness, giving us a surer sense that life has meaning, that we have a purpose. In the growth of such a conviction, we will begin to feel a harmony with all creation, with all that happens. In time, possessing an invincible power, we shall overcome and cast out all fear. End of chapter. Chapter 7, Measuring Up to the Standard of Goodness. From Psalm 118, verse 1. O give thanks unto the Lord, for He is good, because His mercy endureth forever. From the book of Matthew, chapter 5, verse 44 and 45. Do good to them that hate you, that ye may be children of your Father which is in heaven. For He maketh His sun to rise on the evil and on the good. Quote from Francis Bacon, "Goodness I call the habit, and the goodness of nature the inclination. This of all the virtues and dignities of the mind is the greatest. Without it man is a busy, mischievous, wretched thing." A quote by Ben Jonson, "Heaven prepares good men with crosses, but no ill can happen to a good man." A quote by Mencius, "A real man is he whose goodness is a part of himself." A quote by Milton, "Good, the more communicated, the more abundant grows." A quote by Sir P. Sidney, "Doing good is the only certainly happy action of a man's life." A quote by Tennyson, "However it be, it seems to me, 'tis only noble to be good. Kind hearts are more than coronets, and simple faith than Norman blood." A quote by Daniel Webster, "Real goodness does not attach itself merely to this life. It points to another world. In East of Eden, John Steinbeck writes, I believe that there is one story in the world and only one. Human beings are caught in their lives, in their hungers and ambitions, in their avarice and cruelty, and in their kindness and generosity too, in a net of good and evil. A man, after he has brushed off the dust and chips of his life, will have left only the hard, clean question. Was it good, or was it evil? Have I done well, or ill? We have only one story. All novels, all poetry are built on the never-ending contest in ourselves of good and evil. And it occurs to me that evil must constantly respawn, while virtue is immortal. Vice has always a new fresh young face, while virtue is venerable as nothing else in the world is. Indeed, there is continuing power to goodness. I've never been able to completely agree with Shakespeare in his contention that the evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones. The reverse, I find, is just as likely true. How often, in talking, individuals speak of some act of goodness that occurred years before. Its influence went deep, still shining recollection. Remember the story of the lion that never forgot the man who removed a thorn from his paw and years later spared his life in the arena? So do acts of goodness imprint themselves and live on within us, sometimes coming to our rescue years later. The word good in Anglo-Saxon and Old Saxon was spelled G-O-D. Obviously, the relationship between good and God is very close, for in goodness there is a quality of divinity. In his search to know the nature of God, man long ago discovered the truth when he vowed, God is good, his mercy endureth forever. Little wonder is it that some of the most noble masters of life have been the men who have expressed or done the greatest good. Said Demosthenes, everything great is not always good, but all good things are great. Think of the individuals in the long sweep of history and those we have known in the briefer limits of our own personal lives, who have succeeded most in living worthwhile lives. Have they not measured very high against the standard of goodness? A woman who came to me some time ago is typical, I believe, of all of us. After she had outlined the troubling and unhappy experiences that had beaten her down, I said to her, We've covered rather fully the negative and disturbing things that have happened to you. Before we have our next meeting, I'd like you to make a list of the people you've known who have done you not the worst, which we've talked about today, but the best. When I saw her a week later, her attitude had changed. There was a note of self-confidence that hadn't been there before. She began to tell me first of a playmate when she was a little girl of 4 who had given her a doll in a gesture of love and admiration. Then there was a wonderful aunt and a sensitive teacher who had encouraged her through the adolescent years with their confidence in her. Next came an old handyman and a wise clergyman who had given her an unexpected hand of guidance when the road became especially rough. There have been so many good people I've known, she said as she left. I'm so glad to have dug them out of memory. There's no better way of putting it than to say I've let them live again, and for me, they make life worth living once more. In the Apostle Paul's second letter to Timothy are the words, And if a man also strives for mastery, yet is he not crowned except he strive lawfully? In Paul's thinking, the law was good. It was identified with order, consideration, fair play, justice. We can paraphrase his thought, without doing him an injustice, to have it read, if a man strives for high achievement in life, he will truly be crowned if he follows the path of goodness. In an extended journey across India some months ago, I felt the profoundly good influence of Gandhi on that land and people. In the north, at New Delhi, where his body was cremated, rich and poor came to do him homage, and with them I too bowed in silent recognition of his greatness. Weeks later, at the very southern tip of India, where the Indian Ocean, the Arabian Sea, and the Bay of Bengal mingle their waters, I again mused on his life. Gandhi's ashes had been scattered on those waves, which, in time, must ripple out and touch the shores of all nations. Before I addressed an audience in the city of Madurai toward the end of my stay in India, I stood outside the auditorium where a statue of Gandhi had been erected, and I read the inscription at its base. There's no religion higher than truth and righteousness. Here was expressed what I had felt increasingly throughout the length and breadth of that vast subcontinent. Gandhi was a great man because he expressed in thought and action the qualities of goodness. His religion was that of truth and righteousness. In his life was the merging power of mercy and compassion, and his own words reveal the strength of his convictions. They show, too, the foundation on which his character was built. He wrote, "Love is the basis of the search for truth." I'm realizing every day that the search for truth is vain unless it is founded on love. It is quite proper to resist and attack a system, but to resist and attack its author is tantamount to resisting and attacking oneself. For we are all subject to some weakness and are children of one and the same Father. And as such, the divine powers within us are infinite. To injure a single human being is to injure those divine powers within us, and thus the harm reaches not only that one human being, but with him the whole world. Indeed, a man who thought and wrote like that lived by truth and love, by humanity. Our relatively new science of psychology is helpful in enabling us to see more clearly the closely woven threads of good and evil. The older science of theology teaches that evil is fallen or unregenerated good. Psychology has pointed out that there is no instinct, no primary impulse in man that has not contributed to the development of the race. We may say that conceit or avarice appear as wrong, but psychological studies show that these wrongs are perversions of instincts that in pure form can be of benefit to mankind. Evil is the misplacement of a necessary and basic good impulse. As J. Arthur Hadfield, the English psychotherapist, expresses it, a primary impulse is misplaced if it persists beyond its phase, if it is directed to wrong ends, or if it is attached to wrong objects. The charitable and forgiving spirit in the right place, directed to the right end and the right object, is magnificent. In the story of David, there is an instance when, after being unjustly treated by King Saul, he had to flee for his life, and with a few loyal followers, he hid in an isolated cave. Saul came into the region with his warriors, intent on finding and destroying David. In his search, Saul entered the very cave where David and his men were hidden. Wearied, the king lay down and fell asleep. David's followers urged him to kill Saul. Here was a perfect opportunity to be rid of his enemy. Instead of plunging a dagger in Saul's heart, David quietly cut a portion of cloth from his oppressor's mantle. Later, he showed it to Saul, thereby indicating that he might have taken the king's life, but had spared him. Where in all literature is there a more noble example of charitable forgiveness than Jesus? Hanging on the cross in an agony of pain, having cause for bitterness toward fate and those who were torturing him, he yet petitioned, "Father, forgive them. They know not what they do." but a charitable disposition toward one's fellow man in some circumstances may be the opposite of good. The weakened individuals walking this earth who have been pampered and coddled and sheltered by overly solicitous and forgiving parents are victims of an intended good gone beyond its place. Such kindliness does more harm than good. The violent reaction against such misplaced goodwill caused the cry, "Damn you, charity, give me justice." Granting that Steinbeck is right in saying that the only drama is that of men and women caught in a net of good and evil, how do we, in the net, achieve more good than evil? By what means do we leave an imprint for good rather than for evil on the orbit of life? The first and the last thing I know is that there needs to be a continual cultivation of good ideas. We grow in goodness as we think good thoughts, do good deeds, associate with good people, and search for goodness of spirit all our days. The Bible tells of a man named Joseph of Arimathea, who, when there was no place to lay the lifeless and broken body of Christ, gave his own tomb. Other than that act, the only description we have of the man is this: "And, behold, there was a man named Joseph, a counselor, and he was a good man and a just." I am sure that there is more than that one act by which he achieved immortality. There must have been a day-by-day pattern of goodness that increased in his spirit and his thought drew closer to God. I have limited experience in gardening, but in my few attempts I have noticed that in order for healthy plants to get a good start, it is necessary to cultivate them regularly. The weeds have to be systemically pulled out, but once the plants have a strong start, be they beans or tomatoes or what have you, the shade they create and their increasing stature are a means of thwarting the weedy growth that would diminish their healthy life. The plants themselves suffocate the destructive elements. Cultivating is still necessary, but with each hoeing they achieve greater strength and health. Some time back I was speaking with a friend about the matter of continually feeding one's mind and spirit with sound and invigorating ideas. She responded by telling me of a method that worked for her. At the beginning of each day, she sought through prayer to feel what she called the vital vibrations of her life in harmony with God. If my creative energy can be placed in keeping with that which is eternally good, she said, then the negative, the evil, the non-productive and destructive thoughts and actions are eliminated. They simply die of starvation. But, she added, I have to work at it all the time. Knowing that woman for years, I saw how her efforts paid off. The goodness she put into herself bore fruit in a good life. I recall a man who had been an admirer of Emmett Fox and who had attended his lectures. He reported that Dr. Fox advocated time and time again visiting each day with God. No matter what it was called, a moment of meditation or prayer or anything else, let there be a regular time when one's soul opened to the waters of eternity. The stagnant pools of negativism, discouragement, bitterness would be purified as the vast cleansing of the living ocean passed over them. In whatever way we can best suit our own lives, we should use this technique for growth in goodness. Faithfully begin each new stretch of time, each fresh task with God. Silently say, my life, this world of which I am a part, my work, all are filled with good and potentiality. It was all made by God, who looked on it all and declared it was good. As I think and speak and act at this day, I will only think and speak and act in keeping with that which is good. Daily, hundreds of thousands of people find strength by reading devotional and inspirational literature. Each individual must experiment to find the best way to cultivate and nourish his conscious and subconscious being. Most of us need a starter of some kind, It can be just one inspiring thought, one provocative idea, one beautiful line of poetry, or one constructive phrase. For centuries, men and women have found the Bible the inexhaustible source for such inspiration and guidance. Read it until, like Coleridge, you can say, "It finds me," or muse over it until, as others put it, "I find marching orders for the day." Whatever your starter, savor it. Apply it to yourself. In the visualization of the day ahead, say to yourself, "I will not be thrown by any setback or opposition. I may not avoid being knocked down, but it will be only for a moment." Not long ago, I was in the home of a man I had long admired. His services and achievements in our nation and abroad had been recognized through 3 generations. He was a man of integrity and dependability, a good man. In his 80th year, he was just recovering from a serious illness. His wife took from the little table at the side of his chair an old Bible. The cover was worn with such handling and cracked with age. Throughout the book, pages were marked, dates written in pencil. Some were of the 19th century. At the age of 19, my husband went on his first business trip to the Orient. This Bible went with him then and on many subsequent trips around the world. With love and admiration, as she looked at him, his wife added, "And when things were hard and temptations perhaps strong, he would put down the date of the reading of a chapter that had helped him over that hump." As I looked at that man, I saw a great and good life. As I looked at the old Bible placed in my hands, I know I was looking at the source of that greatness and goodness. We begin to see the goodness of life and become better ourselves from the seeing as we respond constructively and positively to every situation. Tolstoy, in Anna Karenina, speaks of the quiet and constant light that is seen on the faces of those who are successful. Of this I am sure. If we will put on our faces the quiet and steady light that looks at every situation, every event, every contact with another human being, with the idea that everything has good propensities and possibilities, we will find that it is so. We will see that life is good. The glow of that knowledge will be real. A cheerful temperament, a dominant, positive mood will help us find the good life. Brahms found it. He thought well of everybody. He let children ride on his piggyback, delighted to listen to and lustily applaud the gypsies who played on the fairs. There was a wonderful quality emanating from him in every situation, and individuals touched by that emanation reflected back the same quality. Both Jews and Christians do a great injustice to their heritage when they force their religion into a dour, repressed, negative form of expression. Alexander Miller, in his book The Renewal of Man, sensitively crystallized the outlook of the ancient Hebrew. He described it as a lip-smacking, exuberant delight in the ingenious beauty and variety of the created world. In wine and milk, olive oil and honey, it is a world whose paths drop fatness, where the little hills rejoice on every side. Such a world, went on Mr. Miller, has a place for heroism, but none for aestheticism. One of the dominant traits of Jesus was just such a positive delight with all of life. Farmers and publicans, herdsmen and soldiers, holy men and sinners, lepers and fishermen, all found him responsive. A biographer might be inclined to write only of his defeats. His disciples failed to understand him. One was a traitor. The crowds that once hailed him as Messiah demanded his crucifixion. Having lived in poverty, he died ignominiously on the cross. But such a plot would miss completely the power of Jesus. He was never defeated. His death became one of mankind's most stirring symbols of triumph. And the reason? The indestructible faith he had in life, in God and man. He gave that faith to others too. The biographer, to truly catch his spirit, must conclude with his own radiantly affirmative words, "My joy no man taketh from me." We grow in goodness of character and the good life when we are willing to take the time and pay the price to find the good in even the worst situation. Some time ago, I was walking to one of the most successful men of our day. In the course of our conversation, he made the statement that the best things that had come to his life had come out of what, on the surface, had always appeared to be the worst situations. Intrigued, I asked him to explain what he meant. He told me of his being fired from a position earlier in his career, but that crushing experience gave him the humility and sensitiveness and determination to be better. They proved to be tremendous assets when he started another job. He told me of a bitter misunderstanding and of unjust claims made against him by a man he had trusted and had considered a friend. Business reverses at a large stage in his career were another setback. Out of every one of the occasions when he seemed to have been beaten down, he discovered positive values that enabled him to stand straighter than ever before. He had something of the quality of Jacob when he came to the brook whose crossing would mark his return to his native land. All night long he wrestled with an unknown assailant. He was injured in the struggle. All his life he was too limp because of the encounter. Yet, as the dawn was breaking, he cried, "I will not let thee go except thou bless me." If we can say that to life, we can find the good in every difficult situation. I'm not advocating a Pollyanna attitude, which closes its eyes or glosses over difficulty or pain or sorrow or conflict. Rather, it's just the reverse. Take off the colored glasses, look at and grapple with your assailant openly, honestly, realistically. Wrestle with it until it is transmuted into something positive. And remember, one of the greatest and most powerful texts in the Bible is, "All things work together for good to them that love God." To achieve self-mastery, we must face up to our fluctuating moods and try to prevent sharp changes of attitude. They can be caused by physical weariness and physiological deficiencies. They can be brought on by overexertion, too much pressure on our nervous and mental resources. When the clouds of depression start gathering, we must do something constructive to dispel them. The mind that can contemplate goodness will be prepared for such emergencies and provide some safe value for the occasion. For one person, it may be a notebook built up across the years of ideas and quotations that have been helpful in his life. For another, it may be a refreshing walk or an interlude of listening to music. One woman told me of a method she uses, which apparently never fails her. "The floor of my laundry room always needs a cleaning. I keep putting it off. When I start getting blue, I make myself go to work scrubbing it up. When it's done, I have a good feeling inside. I admire the shiny floor and tell myself that if I can make myself do that, there is nothing at all that can lick me." Often, some task requiring physical exertion lifts low spirits and sends a bad mood packing. Knowing when we need a letting up or a letting down would save many of us from working half-heartedly and irritating ourselves and others. One doctor I know says, "When I get at a low ebb, I do my patients more good by going away on a fishing trip than I could possibly do them by barking at them in my office." In the book of Proverbs is a beautiful description of a worthy woman who was highly honored by her husband. The chapter describes her as doing him good and not evil all days of her life. The source of her goodness is probably explained by her many-faceted interests in life. She was a seamstress, a planner, and organizer. She was interested in business and conversation. She cultivated her own character and philosophy and disposition. She was interested in people. Her horizons were broad, and consideration flowed from her to the poor and needy. This variety and change of pace surely made it possible for her to achieve the resourcefulness to master the bad moods that might otherwise have drowned her. I'm inclined to believe that most men and women cultivate varied interest. If one activity won't turn back the clouds of despair, there are others that will. If the children are on edge and discouraging, there's always one's coin collection to re-examine, or the piano to which one can return for relaxation. I've always liked the analogy of the little ship that bobs along on the vast and rolling sea. Water is all around it. Unknown depths are beneath it. But all the water of the world cannot sink that little ship unless it gets on the inside. And so it is with our mental attitudes, our spiritual fortifications, believing in goodness in the world, having the conviction that our lives are made for good living and good action. We can build the framework of a seaworthy ship of life. And then all the turbulent water through which we may pass can do us no harm because we are prepared and protected. We will not let it get on the inside. We should touch on the matter of the seemingly undesirable things that could happen to us which cause us trouble, and trembling at the very thought of them. There is death. There is the thought of being handicapped. There is the possibility that the individual to whom our life is most deeply tied may be taken from us. Such events, as we envision them, are certainly not good. No good, happy life, none that is free, is lived with such a sword always hanging over it, casting its ominous shadow on the present moment. Neither is there satisfaction in never facing these matters at all. They must be dealt with, and then be done with. There are many ways that man has sought and applied with varying degrees of success to be rid of the sense of doom. Since it should not be totally excluded from consciousness or ignored, only the positive approaches can be considered. Think of the sad and ominous possibilities as tares that grow amid the good grain. Looking at life this way, man can say to himself, "If I must encounter you, I will do so without defeat. I will take more from you than you will take from me." Such admirable spirit was revealed by a woman of refinement and privilege who said, "If worse comes to the worst, I shall be needed. There will be a place for me. There will always be something I can do. At the very least, I can minister to the sick in hospitals." But the larger numbers of people there has been a surer way, tested and tried across the centuries. It is to live with the great thought that man need fear no evil, for God is with him. This is the ultimate way to win victory over the possibility of evil. It may be helpful to think of perfect good when we use the word God. There is nothing that can overcome us if we say in our hearts and the deepest depths of our minds, "No evil can cause me consternation, for thou art with me." The individual who lives by that conviction lives more and more the good life. More and more, the masterful life becomes his. End of chapter. Chapter 8. Mastering the Yes and No Department. From the book of Matthew, chapter 5, verse 37. But let your communication be yeah, nay, for whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil. A quote by Marcus Aurelius. Be not either a man of many words, or busy about too many things. A quote by Robert Burns. Firmness, both in sufferance and exertion, is a character which I would wish to possess. I have always despised the whining yelp of complaint and the cowardly, feeble resolve. A quote by Andrew Jackson. Take time to deliberate, but when the time for action arrives, stop thinking and go in. A quote by Longfellow. Decide not rashly. The decision made can never be recalled. The gods implore not, plead not, solicit not. They only offer choice and occasion, which once being past, return no more. A quote by Lowell. Once to every man and nation comes the moment to decide, in the strife of truth with falsehood, for the good or evil side. A quote by Martin Luther. Here I stand. I can do no otherwise. God help me. Amen. A quote by Mencius. Men must decide on what they will not do, and then they are able to act with vigor in what they ought to do. A quote from the Duke of Wellington. There is no mistake, there has been no mistake, and there shall be no mistake. In 1932, the famous cartoonist David Low produced a drawing that became one of the most widely circulated cartoons in the world. This was not just because its message was particularly timely, it was tinged with eternal truth. A little boat labeled World Money Problem was seen rocking amid giant waves that towered over and all around it. In one end, several people were feverishly bailing out the water. A vicious leak had the craft almost half filled. Those busy individuals were labeled Middle Europe. At the other end, 3 figures representing America, England, and France were huddled together. Sitting on the sides of the boat, they were doing their best to stay dry and looking with only a touch of concern at the busy bailers. The conversation of the 3 made the caption of the cartoon, which read, "Phew, that's a nasty leak. Thank goodness it's not our end of the boat." The folly of that attitude can be seen by a first grader. The leak in the boat is everybody's business who is aboard. Surely there isn't any masterful dealing with life unless there is knowledge that all of us are involved with mankind. There must be more participation than withdrawal, more action than reaction, more moving forward than retreating backward. The individuals who do respond, whatever the issue may be, on the side of justice, humanity, mercy, goodwill, are automatically given the tribute of being a master of life. How often I have seen discussions and judgments and feelings gravitate around and settle about the man who has expressed himself with clarity on the side of justice. Alan Paton put it this way: to stand up for the freedom of others is one of the marks of those who are free, just as to fail to do so is one of the marks of those who are ready to be enslaved. We instinctively sense that. All men react to it and are pulled toward it as bits of metal to a magnet. A small religious paper occasionally comes my way from friends in Czechoslovakia. In the summer of 1957, an article described the anniversary ceremonies held in commemoration of the terrible destruction of the little village of Lidice. The paper reprinted a letter from Albert Schweitzer written to Professor Romdaka and all who had part in the solemn occasion. He said that it was important for us to remember the black inhumanity at Lidice because it might restrain mankind from repeating such a brutal orgy. Then he added, we must take up the struggle against the ideas of inhumanity which we still suffer to exist among us. Humanism is the basis of civilization, and we must stand on its side. I have been so imbued with the beauty of the King James Version that I cannot refrain from citing, "Let your communication be yeah, nay, nay, for whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil." What Jesus meant was this: let it be known where you stand, and then stand there. Stop hedging. Avoid long and cloudy explanations. Don't make involved and impressive promises. Watch the business of swearing, crossing your heart, and taking oaths. Be of clear integrity. Let it be yes or no, and then stick to it. One of the reasons that our personal and corporate life is often ineffectual is simply because we fail to take the Master's counsel. Liston Pope of Yale University has made many incisive criticisms of our times. In an address some time back, he characterized us as being an era of conflicting affirmation and negation. We are, he said, living Jekyll and Hyde lives in a schizoid world. Let some basic question be asked. Do you believe in the United Nations? Likely the answer will be confusing. Yes, but no when it comes to merging with other nations some of our national sovereignty in the interest of world organization. Are you committed to the principle of equality? Yes, but also no when it comes to certain of our minority groups. What of the proposition that man is created for and capable of goodness? Are you for or against? Yes, I'm for it, but not when I see the chicanery and selfishness in some men. Are you at peace? Are you for peace in the world? And again, our answer is a complex and an involved potpourri that comes out saying both yes and no. Of course, there is wisdom and realism in seeing that there are infinite shades between the black and the white, but what Jesus tells us is this: let it be known what you're looking for. Let it be clear when you do find the distinction where you're going to stand, and finally when the paths open up, which way will you follow? It is also proper in preparing for mastery in this area to recognize the danger of ill-advised or quick judgments. Those who have often made fully formed and worthy contributions to life out of their own decisiveness and convictions have often been individuals of great capacity for thought and considered judgment. William of Orange, known as the Silent One, was such a man. Thinking of him and similar individuals led Carlyle to exclaim, "In thy own mean perplexities do thou thyself but hold thy tongue for one day. On the morrow, how much clearer are thy purposes and duties? What wreck and rubbish have those mute workmen within thee swept away?" Giving consideration to an important matter is essential, but it is equal importance, at least, to come to a decision and take a firm stand. One can make evaluations too quickly on the one hand, and on the other wander too long in a fog of uncertainty. I think it is important to also see that it is no great sin to change your position or modify your convictions if you are led to a higher position or a sounder conviction. The wisdom that affirms consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds should comfort you if time and circumstance seem to demand a change of course. But here again, the important thing is to set a course rather than merely drift. It is impossible to go in all directions at once, and disastrous to go in no direction at all. There is merit in our seeing the value of definiteness, of decisiveness in the makeup and development of our own character, as well as appreciating it in other people. On shipboard for the first time some years ago, I was impressed with the lifeboat drill. Prior to setting sail, I had been reading of major catastrophes at sea. The awful sense of what might occur in a hurricane or a wreck at sea was upon me. During the lifeboat drill, I was comforted by the definiteness of the arrangements for the passengers' safety. Had the instructions been merely casual statements that there were lifeboats on the ship and also adequate life preserves and rafts, I would have been quite nervous and anxious. But being informed as to the precise place and the lifeboats the passengers were assigned to in the event of danger and receiving instructions about the location of life jackets provided a sense of security and order. We who are parents constantly see the need for preciseness, for definiteness, for the clarity of thought in the rearing of our children. It is by showing them choices in precise rules for conduct, by stimulating their own development in the yes and no department, that their onward and inner security develops. A friend of mine, recounting his schooling during boyhood and young adulthood, recalled one fourth-grade teacher who stood out above all the rest. There was no nonsense about her. She was definite. You always knew where you stood. If you did mediocre work, she let you know it and know it promptly. He went on to tell how that woman's influence was one of the major ones in his whole life. The setting up of standards, the clear-cut requirements, the definite expectations which she put before him and the other pupils were powerful factors in building character. But we can surely add, when we consider this business of decisiveness for us moderns, that we all need help because we are pulled in so many different directions. We are like the 3-year-old with her mask and Halloween costume on who looked at herself in the mirror and exclaimed, "Mommy, I don't know which is me." Many claims are put on us as citizens, as parents, as church members, as participants in a profession or a business. We are always facing situations where it is so hard to know whether to say yes or no. Questions constantly plague us. Is it a time to make a change? Should I modify my point of view or should I retain what I've gone by so far? In this particular situation, shall I speak or shall I keep quiet? How will I serve the highest purpose in the involved situation I now face, by discretion or boldness? How can I keep the weights of social responsibility and the filling of my personal needs in a wholesome and intelligent balance? Another cartoonist, Robert Osborne, in a recent publication, Osborne on Leisure, portrays all too vividly the pressured dilemmas of modern man. One sketch shows the modern housewife like a puppet with strings attached at every joint and extremity, including her nose. She is being pulled in all directions. She, as does her male counterpart, needs guidance on the question of what to hold on to and what to let go. But you wouldn't expect me, and I would be a fool to attempt to give you some detailed blueprint that you would propose to fit the situation of each individual. Each of us must work out our own destiny in terms of our particular abilities, inclinations, temperaments. The balancing of the scales between yes and nays will differ for every person, but we must have that balance. Stephen F. Bain Jr., Episcopal Bishop of Olympia, in an excellent speech some time ago stated, "All true teaching aims to teach mankind how to take sides. Some people shy off from revealing where they stand because they claim they may hurt someone else's feelings. That is a point to be considered. Tolerance, sympathy, and appreciation for the feelings and opinions of others are certainly important factors, since people can feel a sense of rejection if we too vigorously or violently express our viewpoint and seemingly denounce, exclude, or condemn theirs. Special attention should be given to our spirit and attitude as we take our stand." It has been my observation that if sensitivity and consideration are present, there is no position that cannot be taken with dignity. And taken or given in that spirit, any stand can earn the respect of even those who may seem most opposed to it. One of the most enriching qualities of conversation and human contact comes out of differing points of view. Contrariwise, one of the most deadening experiences in life is participation in a group where there is a lack of decisiveness. Man needs the vitality, life, strength that comes when he can say yes or no and mean it. And certainly, this is the way to growth. Self-mastery depends on being able to get off the fence and make decisions, whether they are of a personal nature or have social, political, or business implications. Some of us overextend ourselves because we don't know how to say no, when in reality, there is more merit in being able to say no at the right time. We should be able to make that distinction and put it to best advantage. An able business leader who is of valuable service not only to his particular field, but to the civic interest of this country and the world, once told me that from time to time he requested his secretary to bring in a little typewritten card for him to read at the beginning of the day. It had these words on it: "Have you asked God to help you keeping your big mouth shut today?" There is a whimsy and charm in that question, and there is wisdom in knowing that one doesn't have strength unless it is conserved. A channeling of our capabilities is necessary in order to achieve our best. And one way to do so is to curtail our energy, expend it on the right things, and say a simple no to distracting claims and demands. Aldovana Lloyd Wright, in her book, The Struggle Within, has a suggestion for maintaining a healthy balance in our busy modern age. When we find ourselves caught in this rush from one duty to another, we can well remember the enervating state that this very experience cost us in the past. Remembering this, we induce complete inner relaxation, during which time our poise is regained. We then evaluate calmly what we have been doing. In full consciousness, we can leave it at that point, reassuring ourselves that in a more measured tempo at the proper time, we will again attend to our duties without destroying ourselves in fulfilling them. It is significant to learn how to make these conscious pauses. A technique such as this, adapted to our own lives, may give us the wisdom to see and the strength to say no to unnecessary and unworthy expenditures of time and effort. England's fine literary figure and politician essayist Thomas Macaulay must have been a rarely gifted man. If you read his biography, you will learn that before he was 8 years old, he had written a compendium of universal history. His mark as a literary figure was set high with the publication of an essay on Milton, which appeared in the Edinburgh Review. Led to enter politics, he was elected to the House of Commons and made his first major speech for a most humane cause, removing the restriction against Jews in England. Portions of the speech, said Sir Robert Peel, were as beautiful as anything I have heard or read. Peel was saying what was on everyone's lips. One essay, and Macaulay was a towering figure in the literary world. One speech, and all London was singing his praises as an orator. Appeals flooded in to write and to speak on other topics, to champion other causes. But Macaulay was silent for a long time. Said Elbert Hubbard of him, he practiced self-restraint and knew better than to dilute his fame by holding argument with small men on little topics. Self-restraint and self-mastery require that we say no to self-indulgence. Strait is the gate and narrow is the way that leadeth unto life. If we decide that a complacent, a pleasure-seeking life is not what we want, we must deal sternly with the elements that complicate our life and drain and disperse our resources. But what of our yes? Are there any guides here? There are some suggested ones. The most obvious one, of course, is that within the limits of our physical and psychic ability and our personal responsibilities, we can't go wrong in saying yes to any opportunity to perform a real service to mankind. One of the most provocative and one of the truest things ever said is, "He that is greatest among you shall be the servant of all." This seems a total paradox, running in opposition to our deep and tenacious instincts. But it is true, says Jesus, and the truth of history is on his side, affirming that you and I and anybody else hasn't a chance in a billion of being remembered and thought worthwhile after a century has passed unless we try to do something in the category of servants of all. We should say yes to a vision of life that pushes out beyond the horizon of just making a living for ourselves and providing material comforts for our families. Frederick William Farr wrote of Marcus Aurelius that he was the undisputed lord of the Roman world. He was seated on the dizziest and most splendid eminence which is possible for human grandeur to obtain. But his imperial elevation kindled no glow or pride of self-satisfaction in his meek and chastened nature. He regarded himself as being, in fact, the servant of all. Say yes to any purpose, any cause that would enrich and serve mankind. To perform life's task, we must constantly replenish our reservoirs of inner strength in order to maintain a steady flow of power. But if, in the performance of our duty, we completely exhaust ourselves and become drained and empty, we won't be able to meet our responsibilities. Therefore, we must learn how to say yes to our duties while saying no to over-solicitude in fulfilling them. That was the fault of Martha in the New Testament. Hers was the duty of fixing the evening meal, to which she said yeah, but she poured herself too exhaustively into her duty, thereby missing one of the sweetest opportunities of being fed spiritually by the Master. In too much single-mindedness there is destruction to the self. What does it profit a man if he piles up victories won, duties fulfilled, but has a vacuum where his soul should be? Say yes to the practice of doing one thing at a time. To procrastinate, to say yes and no, but I'll do it later, places great strain on our abilities and energies. It makes what could be done today an increasingly heavy burden for tomorrow, and often poisons a sense of accomplishment with a feeling of guilt. Our life is always crowded, and we only add to the confusion when everything we have to do or could do is opened like a mail sack and dumped willy-nilly on the table, said Goethe to Jane Carlyle during a very troubled period for her. Do the thing at hand, and the next will reveal itself in due course. There is a natural order to things if we will but proceed step by step in doing them. Last but not least, we make no mistake in saying yes to a growing faith that this is God's world, that we are His children, and that there is a purpose in life. Then add to that purpose the determination to do what we believe is God's will. Edwin Markham, in one of his poems, wrote these words as coming from God Himself. I will leave man to make the fateful guess, will leave him torn between the no and yes, leave him in a tragic loneliness to choose, with all in life to win and all to lose. Is that true? Up to a certain point, yes, but there's another facet to man's dilemma of choosing. In the scriptures, it is written, I will not leave you alone. I will come unto you. And Jesus said, Lo, I am with you always, even unto the end. In making fateful yes and no decisions, we become acquainted with one of the most profound experiences in life, namely, that the God who made us is with us. The Bible counsels us, as we face life, to choose whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report. If we follow this advice, we will feel the eternal providence that inspired those words. His guidance will not lead us astray. End of chapter. Let's head over to the next video where we continue with the book titled Secrets of Self-Mastery, an Inspirational Guide to the Mastery of Life by Lowell Ditzen. And we're going to learn a little bit about mastering intuition and also the power of patience. Please do hit the like button, share this with like-minded people, and yes, subscribe to the channel.